Welcome back to Men and the City. In today's video, we're going to talk a little bit more about American politics. So the title of today's video is going to be Trump is an American Illusion. I've wanted to talk about Donald Trump probably since the inception of the channel, but I think now is as good a time as ever. And the reason is because it seems we have a leadership crisis unfolding in Washington, D.C. as we speak. There is a growing chorus of Democrats who are calling upon President Biden to step down, and justifiably so. But if the news media is to be believed, he is strongly resistant, and it makes sense. He's fighting for his political life. In any case, we have what looks to be a leadership vacuum that's shaping up to be filled by Donald Trump sometime this fall or potentially early next year, depending on how the election goes. So what is Trump exactly, and where are we headed as a country under his leadership? That's really what I want to talk about today. There's a very good book that was written in 1962, published in 1962, called The Image, A Guide to Pseudo-Events in America, written by a University of Chicago historian and former Librarian of Congress named Daniel Boorstin. Now, Daniel Boorstin wrote some interesting things, and I'm going to key off with a couple quotes that I think you're going to find interesting. The making of the illusions which flood our experience has become the business of America. Some of its most honest and most necessary and most respectable business. What we need first and now is to disillusion ourselves. What ails us most is not what we have done with America, but what we have substituted for America. We suffer primarily not from our vices or our weaknesses, but from our illusions. I think it's a very powerful statement that gives us some insight into the predicament that we face, and certainly Donald Trump plays a role in that. I vividly remember in 2015 when he descended the escalator and made the rousing and provocative speech that he did, unearthing the tremendous discontent for the political elite in D.C. that refused to talk about some of the corrosive problems that we deal with, whether that's open borders and illegal immigration, or the plight of the economy, or our disastrous trade policies, the issues across the board. And I remember thinking at the time that it would fall flat, that those kinds of statements would simply not be tolerated. And my opinion, I'm sad to say, was consensus at the time. And of course, the very opposite thing occurred. And that began this sort of lightning rod shift of Donald Trump into the political limelight. And as we know, he rode that all the way into the White House. And still to this day, I think he has become the savior, if you will, or the perceived savior to a lot of Americans who are desperate, anxious, fearful of the future. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, the problem is that Donald Trump cannot save America. Donald Trump himself, I think, is representative of the country, as most leaders seem to be at any given time. He is hearkening back to a kind of nostalgia. His very moniker, the Make America Great Again brand, is what taps into that. And it's a very appealing mantra. But at the end of the day, Donald Trump cannot solve the problems that we face. Only we can. In that sense, Donald Trump is a coping mechanism. He's a comforting illusion. He's comfort food. And I say this not to cast aspersions upon him. He's just a man. He's flawed like anybody else. And he deserves a lot of credit for shifting the national conversation and legitimating a lot of the concerns that average people across the country feel. But it's very likely that he is going to be elected. And when he's elected, the real problems that we face, which have only multiplied since he gave that speech in 2015 and even during his presidency, they're going to overwhelm the popular illusion, the sense, the sentiment that somehow he's going to solve all of our problems. He is, as I say, a coping mechanism. And right now in America, I think we are manic for coping mechanisms or comfortable illusions. I think libertarianism is a comfortable illusion that a lot of people on the right like to indulge in. I think Stoicism in the manosphere has become a kind of comfortable illusion. You know, if you numb your pain, if you suspend your feelings, that somehow you can deal with the world as it is. Maybe there's some truth to that tactically, but it's simply a cope with respect to the overwhelming magnitude of the problems that we face, which do necessitate feelings of rage or anger or discontent, for example. The point of all of this is that I think something that Lincoln said is very applicable to the present moment. And that is, he said, we must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. In this country today, in the United States today, we are going to have to decouple from the illusion that somebody else is going to solve our problems for us. That somehow, with Scotch tape, we can tape it all back together again, slap a new name on things, and call it the good old days of America once again. This is a very powerful sentiment that I experience again and again. And it's not one that's going to go away until Donald Trump is elected. And I suspect that when he is, and the reality of the magnitude of the problems that we face becomes unignorable, it's at that moment that we're going to begin to decouple from all of the illusions that have compiled over the last several decades or more. It's the external locus of control that I've talked about before, the idea that somehow we are stuck in this unchanging downward spiral and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, I think that sense of paralysis is going to crash hard once we're forced to decouple from the Donald Trump illusion, which I think is coming maybe this year. Unconscious feelings are going to become conscious and more conscious as time passes, and that's a very good thing because that's going to liberate us. It's going to empower us in ways that we simply haven't been for a long time, which I think is the central motif of all of the videos that I make on this channel. Self-empowerment. The idea that we're not up against some kind of supervillain elite that has gamed the system such that there isn't anything we can do, or that a leader from nowhere named Donald Trump or anybody else is going to come and save us. The memorable events of history are the visible effects of the invisible changes of human thought. That is a quote from Gustave Le Bon, somebody I reference all the time. The invisible changes that have occurred are fast becoming visible, which means we're going to have to deal with them. The good news, folks, is that this is our purpose. You know, for so many of us who are millennials and Gen Z, we stare outside the window because we're unemployed or we're underemployed. Maybe our life is directionless. There is some burning sense, I know it's there in all of you, that you were meant for something more. And I think that that's true. But the illusion, in this case, the Trump illusion, but it's not just him, it's a broader set of illusions, as Boorstin mentioned. We're going to have to let those go first. And that's what's going to be truly empowering. And it's not something we're going to do voluntarily. I think we all know that. We're going to go out kicking and screaming. But the sledgehammer of financial crisis, of the national border, of potential wars around the world, and all the rest of it, It is going to liberate us from the comforting illusions of the past, and I think empower us to actually take the steps necessary to solve these problems. Steps like becoming more politically active, fashioning new parties, starting new movements, creating new businesses that are congruent and consistent with the things that we really believe in and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. That is our mission. That is, in a sense, the neo-masculine point or rationale. But we have to get through that illusion first. We have to disenthrall ourselves. And I think that that moment is fast coming. So as Joe Biden sort of withers away before our eyes, next step is Donald Trump, a man admittedly is far better for all kinds of reasons. Far better for America's, for the interests of the average American, for the interests of younger Americans. But an octogenarian himself, practically, who is in no position to overcome the magnitude of these problems because we have to do it, not him. Nobody is coming to save us. Once the Trump illusion is gone, once all of these illusions are purged, that is when liberation will happen. And I think it's close at hand. So, stay tuned for more, and we'll talk soon.